Do you have any final thoughts on execution?
It's damn hard, the hardest part of entrepreneurship. But if you can successfully execute, you will never be lacking in the world of entrepreneurship. So it's something you should focus on and work on developing your execution skills.
I think you nailed it. I couldn't say it better.
Welcome to the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of entrepreneurship.
Welcome to this episode where we explore the vital role of execution in entrepreneurship. From turning ideas into reality to overcoming challenges, we'll uncover how effective execution drives entrepreneurial success.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Tune in, buckle up, and let's unleash the entrepreneurial spirit within. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Professor Palin. How are you today?
Doing very well, been very busy, and I understand you just came back from an exciting trip.
I did. My brother, my dad, and I try and do a yearly trip. We just got back from the boys' trip, which is a very cool thing. I'm glad we get to do it every year. It's hard to prioritize things like that sometimes. It's a good feeling.
It's very similar to the annual baseball trip I take with my son.
It's very similar, right? Hopefully we can check off the box that we've been doing it as long as you someday. We've gotten together to discuss a short but sweet and very important topic, and that is execution.
That is a critical role in any entrepreneurial success, is the execution.
Because execution is part of the common vernacular, we'll throw a definition on it so everyone knows exactly what we're talking about. It's the carrying out or putting into effect of a plan. Really simple, but essentially in entrepreneurship, that looks like after you've planned out and done all of this collecting of information and decision-making that most of this podcast is about, how do you go do it? How do you make it happen?
It's turning ideas into reality.
Without a doubt. The reason I'm saying this is important is because we often talk about this being the most critical part of determining whether an entrepreneur is going to be successful or not. Do they have the ability to get it done?
Both you and I, the ideas are very easy. The execution is always the challenge, no matter how long you've been at this game.
Right. I've been fortunate enough to consult with a bunch of companies at this point in my career. I've started my own ventures and I do a lot of work at the Entrepreneurship Center. So I feel like I've come across a lot of nascent entrepreneurs. I would rather work with somebody or back somebody that is getting it done on a daily basis, even if they're messing up over and over and over and over again, rather than someone that on paper looks fantastic, can talk the game, has the good ideas. If they can't put it into effect, they're never going to make it work.
It definitely, it made reference to my baseball trips. If you're a pitcher and you can't throw strikes, you're useless.
If you can wing it at 100 miles an hour, but it's not in the strike zone, it's not very effective.
Execution is the bridge between vision and achievement in entrepreneurship.
That's exactly right. Do you have any tricks of the trade that can help execution?
I don't know if we could refer to them as tricks. Let's talk about strategies.
There we go. Better word.
I like to set up clear goals. So I want to define specific measurable objectives, because then I know if I'm moving forward. I like to put together actionable plans so I can break it down into tasks that have specific steps towards moving forward. Also, I like to prioritize what are the high impact activities, because as we've talked about with time management, you can get bogged down in minutia and not make anything happen. So you're accomplishing a lot, but it's doing nothing.
The biggest one for me is manageable chunks. When I first get involved with teams and we look at their to-do list, what they're trying to get accomplished, it's huge, lofty items. The reason those get stuck up is you can't just sit down and get that done. It needs to be broken down into smaller tasks that can actually be accomplished, and you can measure that accomplishment happening. And in turn, that's what creates a pattern of execution.
You've heard me use this analogy many times, but it is so applicable to execution. Is the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time.
Right. We're both talking about measuring out that bite. Where are you going to start? If you look at it in bite-sized chunks, not 10,000 meals or whatever an elephant would come down to, you can actually get it done.
Also, as a strategy for effective execution, I like to look at accountability also. I want to assign responsibilities and then track progress to who's achieving the responsibilities they've been assigned to.
Going along with that, because I think it's really important for startup organizations especially, is who's meant to be accomplishing those sorts of tasks. Because oftentimes I see there's a lack of a partnership agreement or partnership arrangement, however you're running your business. And there's this gray area, this void in the middle of everyone thinks someone else is doing those things. And you quickly find out that no one's doing them because everyone thinks someone else is doing them. And those are the tasks that then become the bottleneck, whatever's impeding the path.
Yeah, that lack of communication among team members can be the downfall of a business if you're not communicating on getting the critical task accomplished in a timely manner.
That's exactly right.
Also, with execution, I like to iterate and adapt. I want to be flexible and adjust as needed. When you're starting and you have your strategy and your goals in place, they're not written in stone, because you may find as you're getting closer to the market, you need to make adjustments, you may need to pivot. That's critical to keep in mind that you're not chiseling this in stone.
The more quickly you can execute, the more flexible plans can be. So if you're only executing to a small degree, you better make sure that that's right, because the next time you're probably going to touch that thing, it might be old, it might have solidified. Whereas if you're executing at a really rapid rate, you can be changing, manipulating, adapting things as you progress.
And if you're not executing it or accomplishing it at a proper pace, the task can become outdated and it becomes a moot point. That's worse than not doing it sometimes.
It is worse than not doing it sometimes, unfortunately. And you see it happen a lot. Even large companies blunder that sometimes. Really awesome feature additions that have become outdated because of the time it takes to develop them and push them to the market.
And there are always challenges to execute correctly. I always think in terms of resource constraints. Most people think in terms of budgetary resource constraints or the limited amount of people that you have to accomplish. But to me, the biggest resource constraint that people trip over is limited time.
As an entrepreneur, I think everyone quickly realizes that time is your biggest constraint. There just aren't enough hours in the day, even if you're not properly eating and sleeping, to accomplish everything you probably want to get done.
In the course of a semester when students are trying to accomplish their project, they might not know what I'm talking about, but I'm continually saying time is your enemy. Time is your enemy.
Yeah. I remember when I was in college very clearly thinking I don't have enough time. And now realizing how much time I had in college, I'd love to go back to that.
The amount of time and effort and energy you put into an entrepreneurial venture, if you're serious, it can become all absorbing. And that's another problem that you can run into. You have to be careful not to let it totally absorb you.
Yep. And hopefully you're passionate enough to where that is a struggle for you. Not that I wish it struggles on anybody, but if you're getting absorbed in something, it probably means you're enjoying it to some degree.
For those who aspire to go higher in their entrepreneurial journey, we got something just for you. Coming up next.
Are you ready to unlock your entrepreneurial potential? Introducing the Janus Entrepreneurial Report, your personalized roadmap to success. In just minutes, discover your unique strengths and areas for growth. Whether you're a seasoned business pro or just starting out, the Janus Entrepreneurial Report will help you identify and leverage your entrepreneurial tendencies. Don't wait, visit Prospirit.com and start your journey to success today.
Now, let's dive back into our journey of entrepreneurial insights.
Now, there's another challenge that I know you've spoken about quite a bit is decision fatigue.
Yes, I'm a big proponent of decision fatigue. The idea is that you can only make so many decisions in a day before you start making poor decisions or struggling to make a decision at all, entering into the decision paralysis phase. I have found it to be real in my life. For that reason, I schedule the most important tasks as the first tasks I accomplish during the day. And then all the small busy work stuff, I can push that later when I'm just doing root tasks, not having to make key decisions about business.
Well, that must be why we schedule our meetings the first thing in the morning, because that's the most important thing you could be doing.
Most important is my brain being switched on and able to think creatively on demand, that's for sure.
Or are you saying, no, when you're sleepy, you can still talk to me?
Not at all. Not at all.
Now, another challenge that I see with execution that people very often face is the resistance to change, and overcoming inertia with many people can be an obstacle.
Without a doubt, people get stuck in repetitive action. It's comfortable. You know what the result is. So you just want to do it over and over and over again. But changing up that action, and I think this is what you mean by the inertia, can be hard sometimes. It's the first three things you're going to do feel right, and then you're on that fourth step doing something different. And that can be hard before you're used to it.
And very often, individuals will face what I refer to as an execution gap, and that's bridging their plans with the actual results and looking to see, do they tie together? Have you crossed that bridge, if you will? And many people fail to even look at that or address it.
KPIs seem to keep coming up in these conversations, but that's the entire point in measuring KPIs, so that your pre-plan can be looked at based on your results. Is the input meeting the output? Because you can always change the input, it's the output that you can't always change.
Another area that I see fail very often, and not just with nascent entrepreneurs, but even with seasoned entrepreneurs, results versus intentions. Intentions are usually pure and correct, but you have to look at the result versus the intentions.
Without a doubt. I mean, the results is what everybody else sees. Nobody really sees the intention. Maybe your direct team can see it because they're around you enough, but outside of that, people are only seeing the results of those actions.
And I like to look at the momentum and traction of the product to see if I'm continually moving this forward at a fairly accelerated pace, and that's critical for the execution.
Without a doubt, the more you're focusing on that, the more velocity you're going to build.
Now, another commonality that we talk about very often is learning through action. When you're executing, are you getting real world feedback from your investors, from your customers, from your suppliers? Any failure can turn into a learning opportunity. If you don't do that, you probably won't succeed with the execution.
It's a great way of framing it, because if you are executing or not executing, you're going to hear about that if you're checking in with investors and customers, because they're the ones that see the output, not the intent in the beginning.
As we speak about very often, this is not a one-time action at the beginning of executing. To succeed in any venture, you have to continually execute. This is an iterative process, continually repeating the steps that we just discussed.
Oh, it never finishes. You'll be executing until the day you're not in business anymore. The one last thing that I really thought about when we proposed this as an issue that we're going to talk about is the concept of momentum. If you're just getting into this or just trying to change up how you're executing, it's really tiresome. Something that I constantly think about is this building of momentum. If you're executing 100 tasks a day and that's tiring, if you do that for 3 weeks, 100 tasks is routine. And then you can do 125, 150, 200. So I would just encourage our listeners that if you don't feel like you're getting enough accomplished during the day, stick with it. Just like running becomes easier to go longer distances, or lifting weights becomes easier to lift heavier and heavier, the number of tasks that you can accomplish does become easier day to day, week to week.
I use an analogy. It's akin to pushing a snowball up a hill. You're pushing it bigger as the snowball is being pushed. It gets larger, it gets heavier, and you're still pushing up the hill. It's exhausting, it's very tiring, but you have to keep pushing it forward. But then you reach the point, you hit the apex, and now the snowball is going down via gravity, and it's moving so rapidly, the challenge becomes keeping up. Don't get too frustrated until you hit the apex.
I love that. Do you have any final thoughts on execution?
It's damn hard, the hardest part of entrepreneurship. But if you can successfully execute, you will never be lacking in the world of entrepreneurship. So it's something you should focus on and work on developing your execution skills.
I think you nailed it. I couldn't say it better. It's difficult, but it's a worthwhile skill. Let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
As we wrap up another episode of the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, we extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Your dedication to the entrepreneurial spirit fuels our passion for creating this podcast. Check out profspirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.